Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Free TV. It is Wednesday, November 1st, All Saints Day here, 2023. So glad to be back with you. And we have a great show today because we have Douglas Gabriel and Michael McKibben back on the show. And we're going to be talking about sort of the intelligence and the biblical sides around what's going on right now with Israel, with this whole plan of World War III, this sort of jump start on Armageddon by Cartel Babylon, and see what everybody has to say about it, what we all can bring together. And then we're going to kind of reach in the end to talk about debunking all of the hype around the Albert Pike letter that is really just a kind of psyop on the side. But we're really glad to be back with you. I'm going to bring them in and I will introduce them as I go. Oops, wrong way. I'm still kind of getting the thing together here with my StreamYard knowledge. But anyway, guys, I will sort you out here and try to get you in a better stead. For some reason, I'm not seeing my three. There we go. All right, sorry. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. I'm figuring out my StreamYard here. All right, so thanks, Douglas and Michael, for being with us. I'm so glad you're here.
Great to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'll introduce you both. Douglas Gabriel, you are a former NSA analyst, former Trappist monk. Spent a lot of time in administration, then in Steiner schools, I believe, and developing programs there. And now you're an intrepid researcher and writer on a sort of esoteric Christianity topics, and always diving really deep into, what are the origins of Cartel Babylon? What's the origins of what's really going on out there to bring out this, global cartel system. And Michael is your intrepid partner in that study with your conclave of researchers. And Mike McKibben is the creator of Leader Technologies, which basically was basically created the digital structure of what is now social media. And you had that stolen from you by the dark forces there of DARPA and In-Q-Tel and all of those evil forces that are constantly stealing everybody's bright ideas. And now you also are part of really diving deep into who's in charge of our system here, whether it is, the Pilgrim Society, as you constantly love to bring them up, at being at the source of what is Cartel Babylon.
I don't love them.
No, you love
I
to
don't love
uncover them. You love to reveal who they are, and we're going to talk
Yes.
about that here in this video. So that was a long introduction, but I want to jump in here, Douglas, if you don't mind starting with sort of your take on what's going on, just like a couple minutes overview of what you see as rolling out in Israel right now.
Well, I would underscore the fact that these are oil deals, as always. Golden Heights was bought by Rothschild and Warren Buffett and all those people. And so that's an occupied territory that the UN has said, your criminals, get out. Well, what do you think Gaza is becoming? And if you look at the Leviathan, the great oil tanker that they are now in the East Mediterranean, the Israelites, the Israelis, they are pulling up more oil from one of the largest basins of natural gas and crude oil and refining it and sending it to shore. But they need to go across the northern part of Gaza to reach southern Israel. So I predict that, first off, since the Israeli Navy has them completely blockaded, 7,000 missiles could not have entered into Gaza without the permission of Bibi Netanyahu. That's just a fact. Remember, he's already been prosecuted for fraud for trying to get his friend Arnon Milchan, who was supposed to be there for doing these propaganda movies, but didn't get back in time because Bibi got charged with fraud and all of his military powers were taken away. Oh, guess what? Bibi's back and he's got his military powers and he's getting money from every deal because as long as he can destabilize Lebanon, Syria, hopefully Egypt also, Cyprus and Turkey, then he can take all the oil. And they're pulling it up faster than any offshore rigs have ever pulled it up. There's multiple offshore rigs. So if you follow the oil in Golden Heights, if you follow the oil in the Eastern Mediterranean, you'll follow why Bibi's back in power and why he's basically proclaiming what the Muslims already have proclaimed. Both the Shiites and the Sunnis declare that the Mahdi is reincarnated, the warning signs for the end of, for the power of the 12th Imam to take over the world, that both of them have their own messiahs. We know that there's a messiah being claimed by the Hebrews, supposedly. The Israelis have their messiah. They've claimed this person. I've watched this person, and I don't believe it. And then we have the Antichrist on the seat, Holy See, the seat of the Holy See in Vatican City, which is that the Pope is no longer a Christian. So basically, from the religions of the book, Armageddon's happening. Missiles are flying from Lebanon right over the city that Armageddon is supposed to happen, Tel Megiddo. And it's happening. And now they've bombed Syria. Americans have come in and bombed Syria because they said that proxy, anytime they say proxy, don't believe it. And anything you hear about any of these wars going on, don't believe it. Go to the banks and see how the money was moved around, and you'll find out the truth.
Excellent synopsis for sure. And the oil part is so incredibly important, especially where you're saying, what is that, the Gulf of Akbar or something, Aqaba or something like that. And of course, they just came out in the last recently few days, The Intercept, talking about that Unit 512, that secret U.S. military base that's being built out there right at that point, right at that point you're talking about, and right, what is it? I have it written somewhere. So it's on a mountain there in the Negev, just a few, as the crow flies, like a dozen miles away from that point. And that it's also a broadcasting base and what looks like an electronic defense base. And it's come out a lot around this company called Pentagon, that is intimately connected with Ehud Barak, the ex-PM, the ex-PM, General Gantz, in Netanyahu's, war ministry there. And then you get Antony Blinken, you get Avril Haines and Dan Shapiro, all connected to Pentagon and all connected to what is essentially a device for tracking everything through anything digital. And it's so incredibly advanced that basically it's able to go through any encryption, everything, and it's right there, conveniently located at this base, 512, Unit 512, very intimately connected with the Pentagon defense system of Israel. So I wanted to just throw that in there for people to kind of flesh out what you're saying, the geography of it, how the interconnection now of having a U.S. what might be a peacekeeping force, and then we have 50 warships, right, in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. That's a massive amount of buildup. And so I wanted to jump to you, Mike, and see if you could, flesh that out some more, or add to Douglas's excellent introduction.
Well, I've been focused on the rapid way this just emerged overnight, and how quickly the Ukraine was taken off of the media. And whenever you see that, you also see the Mockingbird press all line up and all say the same thing. And what has been fascinating is how, and it was the same situation with Ukraine. I would guess 3/4 of the people who jumped on the Ukraine bandwagon didn't even know where the Ukraine was on a map. And we're seeing the same thing now. People who don't pay any attention to Israel all of a sudden are quoting all of these stories that are coming out of the press. And as you know, we've been focused on how this press is controlled and has been controlled since the 1910 timeframe, and how the British took it over and formed the Empire Press Union. And isn't it curious that the history of Israel, of Palestine, is all tied up in British Zionism, which has nothing to do with Jews. And the Jews that we saw going back to Palestine after World War I were not Hebrew Jews. They were Ashkenazi Jews. They were people with bloodlines from Turkey, Persia, Khazaria, even China. And so that, I think, is another huge obfuscation that is being attempted here, that they've got to get the attention away from the bankers away from the people in the City of London who are orchestrating this. So they're creating all of these sub-stories of atrocities on both sides, of anything to do to deviate from the real story going on, which is the banks and their attempt to develop all of these crises in order to consolidate this one world currency that they're trying to create. So we can chase these stories all day long, but if it's coming out of the mainstream media, it's a lie.
That is for absolute sure. And if I like, it's really interesting what you're saying, that of course it's the same old, right? It's problem, reaction, solution. It's
right.
in my real atrocities, but completely manufactured, right? That's my opinion, 100%. Absolutely manufactured, and the more horror they can create, of course, the more people are going to, be enraged and have all their, primal energies activated. Sure.
Let me ask you something, what you said, because I noticed that every time the issue of atrocities comes up, there's always this admission, okay, they're real, but they're I wonder if they're even real.
Oh, I do too.
Okay.
I don't think nobody's dying though. I don't think that I don't think that all of Gaza is a stage right now. I'm not saying that some of it isn't at all. And I still absolutely question. However, I also do know that they do like to murder and kill, and that it is part of their satanic philosophy in the people who are running the show. And so the murder and killing is for them, I believe, just added benefit for the energy that goes into fueling the crisis they're creating, or the facade.
Does anybody believe, for example, that Mossad was surprised by that attack, if it was in fact an attack?
Absolutely not.
That's one question. So secondly, since they were let in, they were allowed to do these supposed atrocities. I've seen little evidence of it, but anyway.
Well, if you go back, Operation Juniper Oak last January, probably held at this base 512, Unit 512, and testing electronics. Basically, they have footage, a lot of the footage, the early footage of what was going on in Gaza, or what happened, the murder, the murder in outside Gaza, right, at the festival. That footage, a lot of it was footage that came out of Operation Juniper Oak, really nice HD footage. It wasn't, it was proven to not be current. And that was last January. And so they war gamed this whole thing all out, really to the T, and then carried it out. It's like every other time, they had a security, test before every single false flag ever.
Right. And so when you see the media all jump on it all the next day, they all have the coverage. Daily Mail has exquisite photos, pages long. You can usually look at Daily Mail and tell whether it's a false flag.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the next day they all had footage. They all had people on the ground. They were pushing out the narrative. Now, we have studied the way these British propagandists work, and that's what they do. They've been doing it since the 1800s, where they will make up an atrocity, push it through the media, get the public to believe it, and then carry on and actually change the course of public opinion based on the fake stories. So they're really good at it. They've been doing it a long time. And that's what I see when I look at this coverage. It's all fake.
Yeah.
And when do we know what's going on? No, I don't know. And can we believe what we see on the film? No, I don't think we can. Because they've got a lot of TV studios, they've got a lot of crisis actors, and they've been shown to use those crisis actors over and over again. Why? Because it's government by journalism. And this goes back to W.T. Stead and the formation of the Pilgrim Society. That's what they decided to do. And every time they need a crisis, it's another story. And because if you think about it, that's not the way a surprise war would happen. It wouldn't happen that all of a sudden the next day you've got blanket news coverage all over the world. That's a telltale sign it's all fake.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, truly 100%. And to me, it's the setup, and I want to bring you in here, Douglas, about this issue. It's the setup for what is going to be the actual beast system, right? It's going to be the Eighth Kingdom. they're setting it all up by creating this now. And I was wondering if both of you want to address this issue of the seventh beast kingdom, right? The seventh beast kingdom, that unknown in between thing, right? I mean, I've been trying to study it. I know that you all have a deep eschatological knowledge compared to me, but this seventh beast kingdom is very amorphous, and I kind of think it to be this Cartel Babylon floating hidden dynasty. That it isn't so much geographical as it is, the Pilgrim Society, as it is this group of elite banksters creating this seventh kingdom in order to bring in the eighth, right? This short-lived, massive trauma drama event, death and mayhem, right? So that they can really bring in the beast system. And I'm wondering if this could be that short seventh kingdom. I was wondering if you could talk about that. What you brought up, Mike, reminded me of it. Either of you want to address it, but Douglas, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yes, well, this is the theological battle that is becoming a political reality, and you have forces that are motivating people on national scales and on religious scales that are manipulating through brainwashing using the highest thing that happens in the human brain, which is consideration of the divine. And so, yes, the last thing that they really want is for the truth to be known. And so we can ask a very simple question about this. If you want to wonder whether what I was saying about Bibi Netanyahu is true, where are the British? Remember, they own almost 50% of Jerusalem. The British still do, the monarchy. And they're the ones who started all this. They started political Zionism. They're the ones who released in St. Petersburg the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They're the ones who released the letter supposedly between General Albert Pike and Mazzini. These are nothing more than propaganda devices that are, in this case, focusing on Jerusalem and focusing on the end time stories from the three different religions of Christianity, Judaism, and the Muslims, which say that it's all going to happen in Jerusalem. And so this is why there's such a huge focus on it, because it brings in religious consciousness. Now, the debate would be, where are we in the apocalypse? And I have a different opinion than most people. I believe that the apocalypse can happen to anyone at any time. If you unveil the threshold between the physical and the spiritual world, you're going to see an archetypal world unfold that shows what the book of Revelation said. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. And that basically you're going to see all of time. Now, does time get telescoped because of impending events that would bring things on early? Yes, Rudolf Steiner said that by the end of the 20th century, as soon as which wasn't long ago, 23 years ago, that we would have the opportunity to speed up evolution by about 6,000 years and cause the war of all against all to happen now instead of 6,000 years from now. And yes, that is true. And because Turkey has mobilized basically their entire fleet, we have two carrier groups, American carrier groups, battle groups with 15,000 soldiers in those ships in the East Mediterranean. And now China has moved a battle group into the East Mediterranean. There's never been a time that I've seen in my life or in history that actually play out the scenarios that are described in the book of Revelation. And if you look from the Muslim point of view, those would be called the 50 signs of the return of the Mahdi. They've all happened. And if you look at the Sunnis, they have 5 signs. They've all happened. So are we at the point that we're going to see, because Russia is there in Syria, China gets its oil from Syria, and now is a friend of Syria's, and basically has become friends with other people in the Mediterranean. So what is this fight going to be over? It's about oil. It has nothing to do with religion, because the religious leaders are all fake, horrible, awful, puppets. They're the opposite of what they're preaching. And so if you keep your eye on the oil and you notice that the British haven't showed up, the British started the Ukrainian war by sending in commandos to go into Russia. And that's where the first explosions happened in the power plants that started that war. Why aren't the British here now? Because When you say Israel, you say Britain, you say the British monarchy. It's one and the same. And so what we're seeing here is another why someone might believe that Pike wrote Mazzini a letter saying World War I is going to happen, World War II is going to happen, World War III is going to happen, and the Muslims are going to try to kill all the Christians. Why? Then what's the message of that? What's the message of the Protocols of Zion? The message of the Protocols of Zion? Kill all the Jews. What's the message of this fake letter of Mazzini, of Albert Pike's to Mazzini? It's kill the Muslims before they kill the Christians. This is the same old story. It's the same old nonsense. And it is the British Pilgrim Society that laid out the plan that is described in that letter to Mazzini, which is, in fact, one of the great discoveries that Michael and his miners have brought forward. The plan was laid out at the turn of the century, around 1902. And that's when most of these things were actually happening. And the plan's been laid out and is being followed absolutely to the T.
Right.
Excellent. And so it's basically it is the self-fulfilling prophecy on stage, right? That they create the scenario to, jump the shark here. Like you said, Steiner said it can all happen now rather than way in the future. And of course, that is what Satanism is, what Frankism is, what the Sabbatean cult is, what's, what they all are about, right, is bringing on Lucifer, right, through creating as much destruction and mayhem and jumping the shark on the plan as best as they can, as quickly as they can. And for me, when we look at 50 warships and tankers and all of it, in the Med and the Red Sea and from 11 countries, like you said, no UK, right? But if there was, all they need is this Gulf of Tonkin now, right? All they need is something to set off bunches of countries at once, right? It could be a nuclear missile underwater, would basically suck all those ships down.
We need to encourage them all to stand down and don't take the bait.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to ask all these countries, don't take the bait. Even if you get a rocket on you, don't take the bait and attack, because you'll fall right into their hands. They want the conflict because our bankers need a huge, massive reset in order not to have all their fortunes fall. And I think you're right. It is the oil, but it's also the bankers and their plan for digital world currency, because until they get control of that completely, they haven't achieved their objective.
Well, and that might be the reason for having this, if they're going by the plan, the biblical plan, to have what would be that seventh, beast kingdom right now be this conflagration that plays out in the next while. Everybody wishes for it not to happen. And of course, through our praying is massive power. Right. But then I think also really in our local communities, I heard somebody mention today, a million town march, that we don't need to get in big groups, but we need to be in our communities in visible ways out there, I believe, because the more we let them defeat us with fear and hanging out just online, the more they'll just continue to do what they're just to roll this out. I do believe we need to be visible and out there, and even a small group in every small town is a huge effect, especially when it's projected by the real media for people to be encouraged to act, right? Not these Soros paid for flash mobs, but real, genuine citizens praying for peace, right? And just praying.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, when I was a young Christian, the idea of prophecy, the teachings of prophecy were fascinating. And I spent a long time looking at a lot of that. That was back in the day when everybody thought Kissinger was the Antichrist. And they even came up with the numerology to somehow his name came out to be 666. And I was actually traveling in a gospel music group in 27 different countries. And so I saw the entire Christian world, or most of the Christian world, except the Orthodox, all dealing with this issue of prophecy and getting fascinated by it, spending a lot of time studying it. But there came a point for me when I stopped doing that, because I realized it really didn't make a difference what exactly was going to happen in the Bible, because the Bible says you're not going to know the day or the hour when Christ returns. And therefore, okay, then what is my job? My job is to love. My job is to love my brother as myself. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and love your brother as your neighbor, or as yourself. Getting those two scriptures mixed up. And therefore, I kind of backed off of a lot of that and realized that my job every day is to express the love of Christ in my local community. And so, to what extent does all this prophecy about the Middle East affect that? Well, other than the idea of being aware that any day could be the day when Christ returns, we don't know for sure. And that giving an immediacy to living a good life, probably it doesn't have a lot of use for us. And it is fascinating. It is interesting what's going on right now in and around the Middle East. But those same kind of things were happening in 1948. All those same comparisons were occurring when Israel was formed. And I think one of the new things that people are becoming aware of is the way evangelicals were taken off the playing board by the Scofield Bible back in the mid 1800s. And Scofield created this idea of dispensationalism and the rapture and various things like this that really, it was pushed through the Moody Bible Institute, who was, by the way, very associated with the British YMCA. And we see that it really created for evangelicals a kind of schizophrenia about who the church is, because they said Israel is the people of God. And so it really confused them about, well, what is the church? If Israel is the identity that's the apple of God's eye, then what is the church? And I think that has really taken evangelicals off of any sort of leadership role in providing leadership in these hard times. And I'm really glad to see that this exposure of Scofield is now occurring. And what we've got to realize is that Scofield was funded in his annotated Bible by none other than Lord Rothschild. And that Bible was published in Oxford by Oxford University Press. And we know that Scofield was a scallywag. He was a politician. He was a lawyer. He was a promoter. He was you could call him a snake oil salesman. And he was very successful through his annotated Bible in getting people to believe something that probably is theologically completely off. And so consequently, evangelicals today, still many, see Israel as God's people of God, the choice, even though most people in Israel today would consider themselves atheists. Now, we know from our studies of the Babylonian Radhanites that the ebb and flow of the Jewish people created an admixture of blood that really doesn't make them Jewish anymore. They're not even Hebrew. They're Turkish, they're Persian, they're Khazarian, they're Sogdian, and even Chinese. And so that's the other thing that I think is going on right now, is there is a strong attempt to hide who a Jewish person is in Israel right now. And I think that what we're seeing is the apostate Jews, the ones that call themselves Jews but are not, are attempting to take over. And so I think that's why we see this aggressiveness in Bibi Netanyahu, because he is in fact an agent of the British banks in the city of London, the Pilgrim Society. And so they are on the move, and it's really clear they're on the move. So I think there's another layer here going on. It's not about war.
I think both of you have hit it on the head in that we're going to see a false flag any minute in the Eastern Mediterranean. We've already seen what we called before weapons of mass destruction, which was brainwashing narrative, which was simply propaganda. later proven that it was completely false, and no one goes to jail, although many died over it. So we're going to see this again. We've already seen it. Now, instead of weapons of mass destruction, it's atrocities of mass destruction. I haven't yet seen a picture, except for the blown up northern Gaza after Bibi told him to get out of the North Gaza. He's taking it. And he said he's not giving it back. And remember, he's quoting, I think it was Isaiah, the one that I always love to quote, that the Hebrews invented pogroms, where it says, kill every man, woman, child, animal, knock down the walls and salt the ground. He didn't quote the last part of that, but that's what he has said is going to happen in Gaza. In other words, nothing will be spared. And he expects them all to go to Egypt. Last time that they got pushed into Egypt, the terrorists from Gaza Strip terrorized Egypt, and it took them years to stop it. They don't want any of those people in their country. But if that's why Netanyahu's saying they have to go to Egypt, because it will then destabilize Egypt. Egypt already has a couple offshore drilling platforms, and they're becoming completely oil independent and exporting oil now. That's what would happen for Libya, which is still been bombed back into the dark ages from previous Israeli attacks against them because of supposed missiles that were launched from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. And of course, with Syria, the battle over the oil rages still to this day. We still have troops there. Remember, Obama created 2 of the fighting 5 factions in Syria. So to say there's Iranian proxies in Syria attacking our troops in Iraq, we're invaders in Syria. By the way, did anyone declare war in Syria? And by the way, we have 5,000 troops in Israel now. Did anyone declare war against Hamas? How did we get into this war? And it's very clearly a war. The whole world sees it as a war. And the naval buildup alone should show us that this is one of the most serious scenarios that we've seen in our lifetimes. And basically, it's as close as it can possibly get. Now, going to the Christian prediction that the Messiah will come again and his foot will touch the Mount Zion and all these predictions. No, that's not going to happen. But what's going on? We have a Pope who's a Jesuit, and he's an apocalyptic theologist. And so he believes, just like you said, as the Sabbateans and the Frankians believed, they needed to commit all sins, because until all sins have been committed and are being committed actively, God will not return. It's only like for Noah, the whole world was sinful. Like for Sodom and Gomorrah, the whole cities were sinful. So are we all sinful now? Yeah, I think if you look at the apocalypse, go ahead, try to find me one prediction that hasn't happened. And same thing with the predictions for the Mahdi, they've all happened. So what are we waiting for with the Christians? Well, first off, as I said, we have an Antichrist as the Pope, and he wants to bring the world to an end now. Why? Because the people of the book believe in hegemony. The Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews believe they are supposed to take over the world when their Messiah comes. Well, that, of course, is sheer insanity. That is childish. And anyone who still is participating in conventional warfare is not a human. They have devolved into an animal. And so we have to look at these behaviors, and we can predict them. It's not hard to predict them until right now. Right now we have Erdogan, crazy man, Netanyahu, crazy man, President Xi of China, crazy man, Putin, a crazy man, and Biden, a crazy man. Any one of them makes a big mistake, we literally could see what is predicted in these letters as the World War III or Armageddon or apocalyptic theology, the return of the Mahdi, whatever you want to call it. And all 3 of these groups are going to think that their leader is supposed to then be in control of the whole world. This is the type of globalism that makes me want to vomit. It makes me want to close down the United Nations and make sure that there's never an attempt to play like a League of Nations can come to agreements, because the United Nations has never done anything positive as far as I know. But where are the blue helmets now? Why aren't they in Gaza? Where are the British-supported white helmets that were in Syria creating those false flags? Where is Britain? You see?
So
as soon as you figure out where the British are, then you know what's really going on.
The bigger question, it seems to me, is what do the banks want? because this is all about money. And this is all about assets, property, resources, oil, and they're just using people, killing people, committing fake and real atrocities to get what they want. And so in one sense, all the propaganda, all the stories, all the conflicts are nothing more than kabuki theater, because the banks are going to, at some point, step in and seize the resources. So it's always been about banks. And I think that's where we get into the Babylonian Radonites, who these fake Jews who are running our banks, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, T. Rowe Price, Fidelity, and they're holding most of the assets of the world right now. And in order not to lose their assets, they've got to have something to buy. And so what better way to buy? Look what happened after World War II. They formed the Marshall Plan. These same groups of people formed the Marshall Plan, and then they funded their insider banks to reconstruct Europe. And so this is their game. It's, in a way, it's not even more complicated than that. They're just using religion. They're using people's prejudices to create fake or real conflicts in order to seize assets. It's always been about that for the last 5,000 years with the Babylonians. So by the time the New Testament was written, they knew that they were dealing with Babylonian Radonite bankers that say they're Jews and not. And they called them the synagogue of Satan. We are dealing with that synagogue of Satan right now, seems to me.
Yeah, I don't think that can be denied. It's pretty cut and dry, really, if people are honest. And I want to just mention real quick, and it is an aside, but because you brought up Kissinger and him as the Antichrist, it is interesting that Baby went to see him 3 days before this popped off for his 100th birthday. Okay, in New York City, right? And he also went to San Francisco to supposedly visit with Elon Musk. Okay, and this was on the day of the EBS system test. Okay, and again, bringing in Pentagon and bringing in how a lot of this was meant to go down and how they were to communicate with each other to pull this whole thing off, and also keep those communications completely off the radar, or maybe on the radar base. That is 512, Unit 512. And
so I have a question on Paragon.
yeah,
Is this the Paragon company out of London that is the owner of Seidel, or is this a different Paragon?
I have to actually make that. It would make perfect sense that it is. I know it came out of Unit 8200, the elite unit there of the Shin Bet, and General Gans and others were central in it, and they basically put out of business things like Pegasus, NSO, these other companies that were vying for the intelligence control of the Israeli military and other militaries. And it was through the Biden administration using like a Soros-funded human rights company up in Canada, some NGO, to basically say those companies are bad. They're violating human rights. They're tracking people. Pegasus is the one that supplied the information that they caught, Khashoggi, how the Saudis caught Khashoggi and killed that journalist. And so they basically badmouthed all these other companies to make sure that Paragon got the contracts and was in full control. But the people on the board, the people controlling Paragon, is like Antony Blinken. Okay, it's Avril Haines, the DNI, right? It's Dan Shapiro, the former ambassador to Israel. So and very interestingly, it was Iran, I believe, a few hours before this invasion started. You had the Iranian IRG released this photo of Gans and Ehud Barak, who are also very tight in with the creation of Paragon. So is it connected with Seidel? It would certainly make sense that it is, but I haven't looked into that yet.
You mentioned Kissinger. What everybody recognizes is that in the sphere of the Pilgrim Society, Kissinger is like a godfather, and he works for the crown. And we know very clearly, I mean, just to give an example, when Kissinger became Secretary of State under Nixon, his first speech, he flew to London and he spoke at the Pilgrim Society dinner and gave his plan for the destruction of the gold standard and going on to the oil standard. And so Kissinger has been one of those key players who was raised in the Rockefeller 30 Rock Center, along with Paul Volcker, who ended up becoming chief of the Federal Reserve. And so we've got these certain players like Kissinger who are senior godfathers, but even they, by the way, I should say Sir Henry Kissinger, because he's been knighted, and he's taking his orders from the city of London and the Pilgrim Society there. So when we talk about the Pilgrim Society, who are we talking about? We're talking about probably no more than a dozen people, and they're associated with the Privy Council and the British Crown, and they are calling the shots for the whole world. Now, all these other people that many people talk about, the Bilderberg, the World Economic Forum, the Atlantic Council, all of these groups are feeder groups for that control out of the City of London. And if we go back, like we have, looked at the formation of the City of London, it was in 1067 was when the charter was given for the City of London, which wasn't even a big city at the time. It was a trading post for the Babylonian Radhanites, who had their Silk Road trading centers all over Europe. They even went up to Iceland. So they were from Iceland all the way to China. And that was the precursor to what later became the British East India Company, along with the Dutch East India Company and the French East India Company. They were all Babylonian Radhanites who were trading, they were exchanging currency, and they were controlling the business of the world. And they were not Christian, they were not Jewish, they were not Muslim, they were Babylonians. They believed in the worship of Moloch, the sacrifice of children. Why are they protecting guys like Jeffrey Epstein today? Because child sacrifice was a rite of passage for somebody who was going to be a banker, a merchant banker, since the Ancient of Days. And so we've even heard testimonies in recent years of a banker a Dutch banker would not do that. He was rising in the system, but at one point the next test was going to be he had to sacrifice an actual child as a good Babylonian pagan, and he wouldn't do it. And so he was thrown out. So I think that with Henry Kissinger, we're looking at a godfather who has been taking orders from the British for so long that he's probably one of their main conduits in the United States right now. But they've got other younger people. They've got new blood. They're even trying to raise up Gavin Newsom because he's a nice looking guy and he follows orders and he's completely vacuous. He has no brain. And obviously Kissinger had a brain, but these new people they're recruiting to bring up in the system don't have brains. And I think that's why we're seeing this craziness right now in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And on the Gavin Newsom point, a lot of different analysts have been saying that obviously they're moving forward with this impeachment, right? Or Biden's gonna go, he's gonna leave this earth one way or another. He's gonna be out, and of course the mega tipping point of the release of all the information of his fraud and corruption and stealing and all of it is coming out, tumbling out very fast now. And so him being removed, Harris a lot of people think that Newsom will be installed as the VP. Something to do with Harris, whether, I do believe that there's going to be a lot of assassination attempts coming as this war kicks off. Pray that it doesn't kick off. But as they're kicking it off, a lot is going to go down that's going to really shift the government, right? Because they need to stop the election for one thing. They need to stop the 2024 election. They need to do everything they can. But trying to get Newsom into that position as the, Pelosi, Getty, completely controlled puppet that he is. And he just reminds you of the Antichrist, doesn't he? I'm not saying he is, but like if you wanted to cast somebody as like American Psycho, right, it would be Gavin Newsom. I mean, he is he's not just vacuous. He's
a good order taker.
Yes, and one of very easy to lie. These people that could lie without blinking an eye, just where it comes so naturally. And of course, Pelosi's nephew and her little mafia crime syndicate that she's got going on. So anyway, that aside, Douglas, I wanted you to come in and follow up on what, Michael is laying out there, because and I also wanted to know if you would cover a little bit of what's going on with the Armenians, with Azerbaijan, because it's really connected with what you said earlier about the oil. It's all about the oil on one level, because that is a massive resource. And so we have, of course, the pipelines going through Azerbaijan. Israel's really backing Azerbaijan, okay, who's completely pushing out the Armenians. They've been attacking back in September. We have, of course, that's the oldest Christian country, right? 300 AD, I believe, Gregory the Illuminator, or Gregorio.
Oh no, it was much earlier than that.
Was it?
He goes back to the Apostle Thomas. They go back to the Apostle Thomas.
Right,
Thomas
but I think he made
the
it.
First church in Eshmiyadzin. I've been there.
But as far as a Christian nation, where it was declared for the whole, that it was a Christian nation, I believe it was the first declared Christian nation. But I could be wrong. But that's what I'm
most
studying
people
recently.
say that, but it's much earlier than that. It goes back to St. Thomas.
Okay, awesome. And then, well, I also was wondering, obviously, like you were bringing up before, Douglas, this issue of the Black Pope, the Antichrist energy of what is the Black Pope and the Jesuit Pope, and that in contrast to the Orthodox Church, right? And we saw what I believe was the specific intentional bombing of that the Saint Porphyria Church there in Gaza, right? The third oldest church, they're saying, in the world. And the plan there, because we can say it's all about the money all the time.
That old.
Okay.
So that information that I heard that too. No, it's not that old.
Okay.
I mean, it's an old church for sure, but it's not the third one. And the third one was the one after Antioch.
Okay. Well, you know these things better than me, so I will defer to you completely on that. But I do believe it was built around the time of the City of London was being ratified.
I think that's right.
Around 1150 or something like that, right? But they had been worshiping there since like 500 AD or something like that. But anyway, that's all aside. But I wanted to hear, if you guys could talk about the Armenians a bit here within this whole mix, and because as much as it is about the money, okay, it's always the money. It is the satanic energy. It is the energy of Lucifer and the rising up of that. That's not just for show or to occupy the minds of the Abrahamic, religions. It is part of their plan, and the key killing of Christians and Christian sites, I think is very central in that energetic war that they have going on. And I was hoping, Douglas, you might speak to that a bit.
Well, our dear leader of Turkey, Erdogan, denies the Armenian genocide. Okay, and the Azerbaijanis are, of course, in the old days, those are practically connected together. And if we think about this, it's very, very odd. The next thing I'm going to say is very odd, but they consider themselves to be the original Chaldeans. They consider the Armenians and consider themselves to be the original Christians. Well, let's remember, Abraham was a Chaldean. So it gets pretty confusing here. And then when you want to talk about Turkey and Azerbaijan, and you want to think of the diaspora or pseudo-diaspora, the fake diaspora, where the Ashkenazi Jews were just invented out of thin air as a grandson of Noah to basically, as the research has demonstrated, Michael and the miners have demonstrated this, that when the Babylonian Radnites were finally pushed to the west, they came through there and they adopted the concept of being an Ashkenazi Jew. Now, there's a lot of confusion that they went far north and became the Khazarian Jews. That is a myth also. There's partial truths. But when it comes down to it, the reason Erdogan is in the war is because of the following. There are still 3 groups fighting in northern Syria. Where are all of the almost 4 million Syrians, 1.4 of those 4 million came up missing, by the way. Where are the refugees from Syria that went to Turkey? Did anybody ever see any of them return? Does anybody know whether they exist now? I pointed out that China came and took 1.4 million of them as slaves by bringing their largest troop carriers into Syria and to the port there. And then it was empty, and then they left full. You can tell by the water line. So Erdogan is entering into this war for oil. Turkey has rights in Cyprus, they think. And Cyprus has rights to these same exact oil fields that Israel is pulling up all the oil from. And they're bringing, literally, they're going to bring an undersea pipeline into Cyprus as a deal. This is the Israeli deal with the Turks. And that's the reason the Turks are flexing their muscles to show that they are ready to fight for Gaza. No, they're ready to fight for their oil rights in Cyprus because of Cyprus, and also because they do have oil rights in areas where Israel won't let anybody drill. And that's the reason that they're basically protected. And again, just like Golan Heights, these are illegally occupied territories because they don't own it. So what's going on with Erdogan? He's flexing his muscles, and he literally could go crazy enough, because why? We messed up his whole deal in Syria. He was supposed to get all that oil. So during the Syrian war, the Obama wars in Syria, I should call them, what happened? Who got the oil? Turkey got the oil, and Israel got the oil. Isn't that amazing? Who gets the oil now? Turkey doesn't get any of the oil. That's why they're mad. The Chinese get all the oil, and the Russians. And so the only active pipelines, and the only reason we have any troops in Syria, is because we're guarding those pipelines. For who? We're giving up American human life to guard pipelines so that China can get the oil? This is insanity. We have 5,000 troops in Israel. War has basically been, has started and been undeclared, exactly like Daddy Bush and Baby Bush did in Iraq. They created a war from a UN resolution, and a second war from the threat of weapons of mass destruction. All lies, all false flags. So Erdogan and what's happening in Azerbaijan. Remember, Azerbaijan is one of the major places that the CIA has their headquarters. And going back to what you said before, Free, remember that it's important to remember that in Iraq, the Iraqis are friends with the Israelis. That's the reason they stopped the Hutus and the Yemenis from bombing Riyadh and other places throughout Saudi Arabia, because the Israelis brought their jets over and threatened them and blew them up. Now, why is there that strip that you're talking about, that they, Paragon and Unit 512, and why would they put anything in Saudi Arabia? Well, look at what's going on there. They have one of the largest developments ever imagined in human history, a city that's very, very narrow, very, very long, right along the coast. You had mentioned Aqua before. Why is Aqua important? Well, two things. That was the home of the first tabernacle that Moses came and stole from Jethro, his father-in-law. And so it's still considered sacred, which is at the tip of the Aqua Bay. And also the strip there that they're building this new place. Well, that's the one that is described as one of the flashpoints for the completion of the prophecies of the Mahdi coming. And so their project is insane. It can never be done. Why are they spending so much money on it? It's a cover for it becoming one of the intelligence centers equal to the one that we have in Utah for the NSA. And so these things are going forward. They're not going to stop. We're not going to be told the truth. And if you're going to get all upset and you're going to fly one flag or the other, then you're mistaken, because both sides are equally at fault. And for instance, Hamas was created by the Israelis as when Yasser Arafat took all the money from the Palestinian Liberation Organization. I love that guy. And he bought himself helicopters and great ships and kept all the money and gave the people nothing. Well, they were supposed to be causing a continuous war between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That's why the PLO was created. That's Hamas was created because Yasser Arafat wouldn't give anybody any relief funds, wouldn't give anybody any food or water. And so Hamas is Israeli. Mm-hmm. So it is the Israelis bombing the Israelis. If you think for 1 second that the Palestinian Authority could get a hold of 6,000 to 7,000 high-class missiles. And all you'd have to do is look at the casings of any of these missiles. That hasn't ever been on the news from the Israelis. No, sir. You're going to find exactly where those missiles came from, and it is not where they said it came from.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're being delivered by the Israelis to Hamas. Hamas is an extension of the Israeli forces.
Absolutely. So well said. And of course we have the, the Afghanistan source there of 70,000, vehicles, 700,000 firearms, lots of missiles, lots of everything. That the largest, black weapons dealer on earth right now. And of course, all the Ukrainian money, right? That is just going to fund all of this. And then we have China, CEFC and the CCP, or that, the CEFC, the energy company, right? The oil company, energy company related to the Bidens, absolutely central in getting the funding released for Iran and for getting money to Qatar to arm Hamas, right? So,
well, do we all we have to do is watch Netflix to know that the Mossad is the most advanced intelligence operation in the world ever. And do you possibly believe that they didn't know that was going on? Of course they do. So we don't even have to justify how they got the missiles. We know they were allowed to have the missiles, and we know this was all a creation. And some of those there's one early picture of missiles going up like this and then shooting off like this. It looked just like a fireworks event. And they may have been bottle rockets because they were shooting and they weren't going straight like you'd expect a missile to shoot up. They were just kind of going off leisurely and into all directions. And that was shown as a justification for the Israelis moving in. So you can see this false flag event being staged by the Israelis to give Netanyahu the excuse he needs to go in and wipe Gaza off the map. Why? Because there is some economic need they have that isn't being met by the continuing existence of Gaza. It doesn't get very complicated. He's got to have an excuse. He's got his excuse. We've heard about the 100 people that were, what would they call it? A massacre? They didn't call it a massacre. They called it something else. Atrocity. Okay, so everyone, I heard from about half a dozen of my Jewish friends, and they were all quoting the same justification, the atrocities of 100 people that were attacked by these so-called Gaza soldiers. And I got to add, they were allowed to attack the Gaza soldiers, and it wouldn't be the first time that these pilgrims have sacrificed their own to create an advantage.
Oh,
I like
absolutely.
what you said there,
They
Free.
specialize in sacrificing their own. That's what, but they're not really their own, and that's the rub there. That's the reality. They're not really their own. They're sacrificing who they consider to be the people of God.
Political Zionists are not Jewish. They are not Hebrew. They're not Ashkenazi. They're not Sephardic. They're not nothing. They are simply someone who decided that the Levant should be owned by the British, because that's what it's all about. I like what you said there. I didn't know that Netanyahu went to visit Kissinger and then Elon Musk, but I would guess the following. He went to visit Elon Musk because Elon Musk can provide Starlink to the people in Gaza who can send us real pictures of what's really happening. And I'm sure that, we're not seeing anything from anyone's phones hardly at all coming out of Israel to prove all of these atrocities that happened to begin with to start this supposed new battle. And we don't get to see what's really happening, the total devastation probably of Gaza. So he probably went to make sure, because every single good revolution, George Soros will tell you, starts with social media. That's how it gets going. Secondly, he went to Kissinger. I'm going to guess the following. What's the real issue here? The real issue here is quite simple. Israel says that they're not going to tell you if they have nuclear weapons. Iran says the second we get one, we're going to blow up Israel. All of the other Muslim nations, which are theocracies, support any Sunni or Shiite who wants to kill Israel and blow it up. And so you have to ask a couple questions. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Well, who would he go ask the most? Who created the whole nuclear weapon deterrent myth? That was Henry Kissinger. So he went to ask Henry Kissinger, Henry, I know we don't have any real nuclear weapons, and we tell everybody we're not going to tell them, and that makes them think we have them, and that's our deterrent. But can you tell me, do other people have them? Because remember, Israel and Talpiot, that's the most advanced technology we have in the world. They steal all the best. And so if anyone has it, they would. And if they haven't used it, then they don't have it. And if Iran can't get it, then they don't have it. And if North Korea was only launching old Ukrainian missiles, ICBMs, in all of their testing, which is what we know, they didn't make any. There are no nuclear weapons. And so this whole myth that we have lived under for all of my life, that any second dictator is going to push the button and we're all dead. No, I see no evidence whatsoever that there are any nuclear weapons, certainly not multiple MIRVs, multiple reentry vehicles. And no, if there was, these idiots would have used them by now. And so what was it that caused Syria war to stop? Russia showed up with tactical nuclear weapons in those tubes, those portable tubes they have. They set them up in the airstrip there, and supposedly things calmed down because of the supposed threat of nuclear annihilation. Well, I assure you that little Kim from North Korea would have used one if he had one already. I assure you that the Ayatollah Khomeini and his predecessors would have used them if they had them. And if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Israel would blow it up immediately. That's just a fact. Or America would do it. Same thing with North Korea. That's the reason we didn't launch anything against their continuous launching of supposed nuclear tests. No, folks, it isn't what you're being told.
Let me share a little story. My father was one of the first troop ships to occupy Japan, and they seized the Imperial Naval Academy, which was about 25 kilometers southeast of Hiroshima, and they were seizing the island. And then within weeks, he was taken on 2 tours, one to Hiroshima Ground Zero and another to Nagasaki Ground Zero. They were not wearing any special gear. They didn't even have radiation detection badges on, and they went to Ground Zero in both cases. And yes, the place was devastated, but so were a lot of Japanese cities with the firebombing. And so there doesn't seem, and there were still buildings standing even then. And my dad has letters where he described the scene at the time. Now, my dad is a very pragmatic engineer, and I got to believe if they believed that there was radiation at Ground Zero in either Nagasaki or Hiroshima, he would not have gone.
Yeah, I've heard other people attest to that same thing with their relatives who were high up, level engineers, people who went to those ground zeros. The same report. So it's great to hear that firsthand. Absolutely, and we're getting on about over an hour here now, and I'm liking the way these messages are going here at the end to kind of give people an idea of the lying liars that we're dealing with, and how they can do conspiracy on such a global level, and with that spider's web, be able to control information and create mass formation of beliefs, right? And illusions and perception deception, right, as David Icke would call it. So before we go, I wanted to kind of just bring this up here at the end into sort of with the place that we're at now, and as everyone's kind of freaking out or whatever, just all the energy getting fed into that atrocity machine that they just want to capture our energy with. What would you I would love to hear from each of you here in a wind down, and then I'm hoping we can come back for more talk more about maybe Ukraine in our next video, the Build Back Babylon there, what's going on, maybe dip into, we'll
Build
kind of
back
tease,
Babylon.
Build Back Babylon better, baby, right? That's what they want to do, and that's their plan. That's, that's the 10th, that's going to be the, whatever, the eighth kingdom, when they got it all locked down with the CBDCs and the open air prison planet. But we're getting there. They're trying, not as fast as they want us to believe, but they want us to believe. They want us to believe both that it's not happening and it's absolutely happening right now, right? So
Right.
it keeps us either oblivious or totally in fear, living in defense constantly, instead of in that high vibe, moving towards the good, towards God in our daily lives, connecting with the beautiful people in our lives, our communities, creating parallel realities. Oh, come, let us ignore them type of thing. And so if we can do that more and more. So I
Oh,
kind
you
of
need to
wanted to
be a
hear.
composer now.
You're
Yeah,
the
there we
queen of
go.
monikers.
Or
You're just so
maybe,
good.
yeah, I've got a little Seussian kind of muse out there. But I'd love to hear from each of you. Your comments on that, of that nature. Either of you go first. Mike, you want to start?
Okay, I swear it's this simple. You can tell something is fake by, if you hear something in the news and you go and look at Daily Mail online, and if they have an exquisite article with lots of emotional details and lots of photos, real-time photos of a particular story, you can know that the entire story is fake. Because they were ready. They were ready. And Daily Mail was owned by Lord why do I always blank on his name, Douglas?
Northcliffe?
Lord Northcliffe, who owned both the Daily Mail and the London Times. And so his heritage goes way back. By the way, he also owned the particular place in London that later was bought by a Russian oligarch, and is one of the centers that we have seen. It's called Sutton Place, and is one of the centers of the demons in London. Lord, what's his name again? I have a total blank whenever I think of his name.
Oh, Northcliffe?
Northcliffe. When Northcliffe was he was the chief treasurer of the First Imperial Press Conference in 1909. So we're talking about newspapers that go all the way back to the formation of the Empire Press Union. And his current newspaper, run by his heirs, is one of the key mouthpieces, along with the BBC and the Daily Telegraph, for any of the new propaganda that's getting pushed out all over the planet. And you talked about how do these messages get out so that we confuse everybody. It comes from those newspapers. They write the stories and then they broadcast them out through social media to all of their cooperating TV, radio, and newspapers around the world. So whenever you see a consistent talking mouth where everybody's saying the same words, you know it's a lie. So just switch off your brain. Don't listen to it.
Absolutely. And, I'll just throw in here real quick. We all remember, the compilations where they show every single news channel saying the exact same thing word for word, right? And we know that's 100%. I don't even just, it's so, if there's one thing we could get people to do, it would be to stop watching those mainstream, those CNNers, right? They're just, it's so sad to watch them waste their lives away like that. But
yeah,
also,
if you don't allow yourself to get emotional at these heart-tugging stories, these people are expert at writing heart-tugging stories, and so we've just got to turn our brains off of these people and stop listening to them. Then they lose their power.
Yeah, look for the patterns. Look behind the curtain. What's the pattern show? The same old false flag pattern. Exactly. I did want to mention, you mentioned how the oligarchs, the Russian oligarchs, right? They basically are they're all living there in the richest parts of London now, right? And also it's interesting with Cyprus, right? With all this activity, all the warships, everything around Cyprus right now, and you've got your Kolomoiskis and your all of your oligarchs hanging out on Cyprus, and it's the massive center of the money laundering machine. So to me, that's such a potent part of all of this, that going through Cyprus, such a trafficking center for the banksters, and that here there is this massive military buildup right there. Very interesting.
One more thing, if we can go back to the history of Israel, we've got to realize that Lord Rothschild in the mid 1800s financed the first settlements in Israel, along with his broker Moses Montefiore. And what we've got to realize is that one of the deals that was cut with the Rothschild fortune with Israel is they would fund these early settlements. This was really before even kibbutzim were created. He would fund those settlements, but in return, the business deal that the Rothschilds cut with those early rabbis, of which, by the way, the family of Albert Bourla from Pfizer was a key player. The Rothschilds would get preference on all business deals in commerce and resources coming out of Israel. So what we've got to do is recognize that this has been a British Rothschild creation from inception, and they never let go, and they're driving the bus behind the scenes right now. And when Douglas says we don't see the British, yeah, I kind of see them everywhere, because they love to hide behind the scenes and blame somebody else for what's going on. When in fact, this is all a big bank fiddle. It has been, and it will continue to be as we go forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, Douglas, you want to take us out here?
We're living in the karma of untruthfulness. We are swimming in an ocean of lies. Every single political and governmental organization I know does nothing but the opposite of what they say. So we're living in this contrary, topsy-turvy, upside down, inside out, backwards society. And so that's the bad news. And it's caused because we've been pulled across the threshold between the physical and the spiritual world. Only problem is, once you get across the threshold, you can go up to the spiritual world, or you can go down into subnature, into the realm that these dictators live in. And basically, they're possessed. They're truly, truly possessed. This is not an exaggeration. They're not members of the Illuminati. They're possessed by the 7 deadly sins and by the demons that have been working those sins for the last 4,000 years out of Babylon. So what we need to do in this age is realize that at the same time that evil is now literally surrounding us, attacking us from every direction. I've been asking people lately, and I'll ask your audience, can you please tell me one single organization that has integrity that you know of? And I'm not going to wait for the answer, because I couldn't think of a single one. But the great news is that because we're pulled across the threshold a little bit early, and that's why it looks like as soon as you go across the threshold, you see all the images of the apocalypse and the book of Revelation to St. John's, because it's an initiation description of timelessness. And so you get to see all of time, and you get to see the archetypes that are going to manifest and are easily predicted because of human nature. But what's not predicted is that there are higher beings, not only from the spiritual hierarchy, the divine trinity, whatever you wish to call them, arahats, Buddhas, bodhisattvas, it doesn't matter, saints, transcendent beings are here to help us all the time now. This has never been this way in history. So I see everywhere grassroots rising, amazing human beings that are rising up into angelic capacities. And that's what we need to do. But I'm also afraid of the fact that what we described as the early manifestation of the war of all against all could be happening now. It is the time for us to resist using our children as fodder for the banker wars. We need to resist the idea that a U.S. Congress wants to start up a draft, and also a draft including women, a draft at all. Even the military, even the decisions the military makes, all of those things are literally the opposite of what they're being told to us as. So we need to resist. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that we are not going to participate in that, and that we bring to light the truth, some of the truths we've spoken here today, so that people can Get rid of the fear and anxiety that comes to them from the overwhelming future. It seems as if we don't have the capacities to meet what's coming to us. But in fact, you do. And those capacities are in your heart. They're your higher thinking, feeling, and willing. And they're the higher beings that you relate to in whatever religion you're involved in. But the point is, now we're in good times and we're in bad times. And we ourselves, through our own perception, shouldn't be controlled by perception management by the evil. We should be turning our perception towards the good so that we can literally continue to build on the good, even as evil is attacking us from all directions.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, inspiring. Thank you so much to you both. I'm looking forward to the next time here. I'm feeling some good momentum, and I have so much that I didn't get to bring up and hear your opinions about. So, episode number 6 or 7, whatever it is, coming up soon. And I want to thank you both. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and just God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And then to everybody out there, I will just say, thanks so much for watching. Such a great show. You are free. Keep your vibes high, keep your hands together in prayer, and just try to uplift all around you as much as you can. Help people to see the good and to feel God. So you are free. I'll see you next time.